Shark Terror is a 2025 shark attack movie starring Michael Paré. Paré, of course, a regular in asylum movies these days. And yes, this is an asylum movie, known for mainly mockbusters, but they do have the original kind of movie here and there. And they've actually made a fair few shark attack movies at this point. So, Shark Terror, what is the story? Well, we have a cruise ship which appears to be a recommissioned kind of military ship, but although it looks like a cargo ship, if you ask me. Anyway, so this ship is carrying a number of passengers, and we focus on this mother and daughter who seemingly are quite wealthy, and while they're out of their cabin, this three-man crew of cleaners decide they want to kind of rip these people off, but they're caught by the daughter, and in a struggle, two of these crew members and the daughter end up going overboard in shark-infested water. Now, the remaining crew member kind of wants to initially kind of cover his tracks, so he doesn't really say anything. So this kind of goes unreported until the mother starts, asking questions, and eventually we have a rescue mission to try and recover the survivors. But then we have trouble with the rescuers as well, as they also run into trouble with sharks. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So if you're unfamiliar with the Asylum production company, it's a low-budget American movie production company that makes very quick turnaround films, and obviously kind of quite low budget. What can work? What does work in this movie? Now I'm going to say, I think some of the CGI, I would say 75% of the CGI for them is pretty good. And the Asylum over the more kind of recent years, their CGI capabilities have improved quite significantly. And I've mentioned it on other movies that I've reviewed by the Asylum. And it's true of this one. There are some fairly decent shark attack scenes. Now, this is still a low budget movie. And as such, if you're really picky with the CGI, then you may still not, think this is good CGI. But for the budget of the movie that this is, I actually thought, with the exception of a couple of shots, the CGI looks fairly decent. I also like the fact that we have two separate circumstances where these people are now stranded. We have our original group of survivors who end up on this kind of small sort of outcropping of land, which is kind of quickly kind of getting swallowed up by the tide, along with a second group of survivors, including the mum and a couple of crew members from the ship who are out to rescue them, who are also attacked by the sharks. So we have two lots of kind of shark attacks here. So you get plenty of shark for your buck on this one, let me tell you. Whilst we have Michael Paré as the ship's captain back, safely on the ship. So, there's a fair amount of kind of shark action, and there are some quite fun scenes. We even have a sequence where we have a shark attack and a kind of a man having a fist fight with a shark, which I thought was actually kind of quite a fun sequence. He's trying to kind of distract the shark from another person and ends up sort of trying to punch it. And I thought, it might be a little silly, but, it was kind of a sort of a fun sort of sequence, I have to say. So that I kind of quite liked. It was fairly sort of fun sequences, and because then we have two separate kind of like storylines really with two separate instances of shark attack. You're never waiting too long for another kind of shark attack moment, and obviously it's like who will survive? I mean, it's fairly obvious, but who will survive? The main characters. Who will die? The add-on crew. Anyway, but even so, it's kind of still a fun ticking time to see when these things will happen. Will they get rescued, etc., etc. So the storyline is fairly basic, but I think it's sort of It's fine for a kind of a low budget shark attack movie. I mean, there's only so many sort of different variations you could possibly have of being lost at sea and attacked by sharks, and I've said there's many times on shark attack films. I mean, it's nothing special, but you know, it does what it does to an okay standard in regards to kind of storytelling and things like that. And it tries to add like people being selfish and trying to cover their own tracks, and as such putting other people in harm's way, even if it's for relatively minor stuff like burgling someone's apartment. People are still willing to, you know, sacrifice other people's lives just so they don't get in trouble for burglarizing a guest's room, and they're willing to sort of like, you know, not report people overboard, for example. So it's sort of like has some quite despicable characters in some way, even to a point where they're even worse in a way than sort of like your terrorists and all the rest of it that you kind of get in a lot of these sort of films, you know, because this is like really selfish. I mean, they do try and have a kind of redemption arc for one character. So there was that. What doesn't work with this movie, I mean, the cracks show in regards to the budget. Like I've said, the actual ship itself, I mean, it's kind of like, we know that the asylum gets use of like a disused military vessel, but you know, we're meant to believe it's a cruise ship, but it kind of looks more like a cargo ship, so it's a bit kind of like, well, you know, just it's close enough. Bit of hand waving on that, and then we kind of have these characters go overboard at the beginning, and they just happen to find this island nearby, and if there was that sort of outcropping, it wouldn't be anywhere near a cruise ship. You know, things like this. And then when we have the sequences when they're on the island, it's clear that they're just on the beach. We have this massive, like, long sort of like sequences of the beach and big waves, and it's clear it's kind of just on the beach and things like this. So there's some definite sort of production that you can just kind of see through, where it's clearly such a kind of a low budget, and the sort of the location shooting or the sets or whatever it is doesn't really look authentic. Now that's, you might say that's par for the course with the asylum, to be honest with you, but you know, it's kind of amusing in some degree. I will say the kind of the lack of story here, you end up kind of feel like you're treading water, if you excuse the pun, because you know, we have two different groups of people lost at sea. And then we just have Michael Paré on the boat trying to kind of like coordinate it, and you feel for a long period of time the status quo isn't really kind of changing. It might have behooved them to try and have more characterization, a little bit more kind of like set up at the beginning of the movie, because it feels like the movie's struggling to fill the runtime here, and as such, a lot of the scenes seem kind of extended and kind of go past their expiration date in a way, and it ends up becoming a little bit stale, even though it is punctuated with a reasonable amount of kind of shark attack sequences. You're just going to feel, okay, there's not a lot to this film ultimately in regards to kind of narrative, and this is the problem with this, and it's very quick turnaround. You don't want to have a particularly kind of complicated script, and one where it's just easy to kind of make. And this is the thing, it's a very basic story, it's a simple setup, and that's it effectively. I think some of the acting's a little on the hokey side, even by asylum standards, if I'm honest. There's some silly moments. For example, we have our original kind of people that go overboard, and they end up on this island, and they go, "We got to get some food." And they've literally just said, and like seen a couple of minutes ago, they've been lost at sea for about half an hour to an hour, and they're already having, "Oh my God, we need to try and find some food." It's been an hour tops. I mean, come on. Things like this. So there's some sort of silliness to try and have this kind of inflated sort of drama, and have scenes where it kind of just fills out the runtime of a lot of kind of talky scenes and things like this, which is, again, we often say the phrase conversations in rooms. Admittedly, you can have conversations out in the open environment, but it's still just kind of like cheaper dialogue scenes to kind of pad out the runtime, because there's not really a lot of story here. I think the CGI is for the most part fair. there's one or two scenes, especially when there's this shark capsizes this dinghy on the second group of people, where the CGI doesn't look particularly strong and looks quite cheap. Maybe it was done later or something like that. Because the other, the other sequences I do think are okay, and they use a lot of kind of like, stock footage and stuff. So the sharks always look a little bit inconsistent. There's things like, when we have scenes during the night, it's incredibly hard to see what is going on. But when we have stock footage of sharks underwater, it seems to be lighter down there than it is on the surface, and things like that. So look, it's a cheaply made asylum movie. I don't think it's necessarily a bad film. I actually think the shark effects are reasonable. The story is simple, but it's okay. It's all around a fairly average low-budget shark attack movie. So you've probably guessed my score. It's a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? I look forward to seeing you next time.